So, tonight, what I wanted, we need to finish the discussion of what is required for marriage to remain. I had to just kind of cut that off at the very end, and I just have a few things that I don't want to miss before we move in to what I think to be my last message here in addressing two primary questions. So for marriage to remain, so this is a connection of statements by William Gouge in his book Domestical Duties, John Bunyan in a collection of essays on marital duties. When you read some of the titles of some of the Puritans, you can really think they're just all about duties. But when you read them, you see that it's really a great marriage and connection of love and duty. For marriage to exist, you need a man and a woman. For marriage to remain, most of the Puritans bring together the argument and the discussion that marriage needs and must require duties, and it must be brought in with love, affection. So 4 final things just to address in order for marriage to remain. The setup for this is that for marriage to remain, there must as well, inside of having duties and love, it is displayed by cohabitating. Now, I'm using the term cohabitating in the positive way. The culture that we're living in today would like to use the word cohabitation rather than marriage. And maybe that's a better word for what many are doing who want to take over the name marriage or the word marriage. But there must be, in order for marriage to remain, and in order for this marriage to be a picture of the gospel, then there needs to be a necessary movement or a necessary requirement in it that there is also in this union a cohabitating. A husband and a wife living together. And the Puritans are good to think deeper, I think, than I normally do. I don't. When I read these guys, I think, man, it makes so much sense. But why can't I think like that? And why can't I think that deep on these matters? And at the end of the day, you think, well, it makes complete sense what they're arguing for. So there must be a cohabitation where you take Genesis chapter 2, verse 22, and you recall what God says, that the man shall leave his father and his mother, and he shall cleave to his wife. I mean, you really can't read that and think that marriage can be anything other than being together. They cleave together, and they are one another. They are cohabitating. They are dwelling together in the same place. Does it mean they have to be in the same room all of the time, in the same location all of the time? No, but they're dwelling together in order for a marriage to remain. It's Bunyan who makes an argument that on certain occasions, and his argument would be less than more, that there may be reasons for husband and wife to be separated for small seasons of time. It's interesting that it would come from a guy like Bunyan who spent long stretches of time away from his wife. But that was because he was in jail. But he does make an argument that there should be rare, lesser times when the husband and wife live in separate places. And he's good to think it all the way out. He says it ought to be rare, and it ought to be only in special needs or occasions. And he quantifies this as this, that in times of ministry, that a husband and wife may be separated for a season of time. But his argument is always the same, and that it should be for a short period of time. He doesn't necessarily say what a short period of time is, but I think reasonably we could be thinking that it would be dangerous when a husband and wife are beginning to stretch their separation, not because they're angry at each other, but because of ministry or otherwise, when they're away from each other for longer periods of time. Say 2 to 3 to 4 weeks, where they're completely separate from each other. And then I think you could build a pretty strong case with extenuating circumstances, perhaps like a Bunyan who's in jail, that he's separated from his wife for a much longer period of time than that. But in a unique manner as well, Bunyan's wife visited him at the jail most every day. So where they didn't dwell together, they were still in connection with each other in that. But he says, rarely should it happen, but in times when it is necessary, for times of ministry. He says also there ought to be allowance for husband and wives to be separated from each other in times of illness. I think we could see this is certainly more fitting for a day in the 15, 16, 1700s than today, where isolation is going to be needed. You've come down with a sickness, and you simply, for the benefit of the whole house, you need to be away from the house. And so Bunyan would say that would be an appropriate time that husband and wife could be within agreement with each other to be separated for a time. And furthermore, just in some other statements that he makes, that they're in times of extending compassion to others, which would be similar to his statements about ministry, but where if there is a long stretch of time where an individual is giving medical care to another, that there could be extenuating situations and circumstances in giving compassion to others, that there could be longer periods of time of separation. But they're on purpose. They're not just random, we'll see you when I see you kind of times. And then the last time that he brings up is, and he's very clear on this is for occasional times of business. Again, he doesn't quantify specifics about how long that is. Is it a day? Is it 2 days? Is it 3 days? But I think we can certainly take the caution of what Bunyan is saying in his day and make strong argument for it in our day, that a businessman who's spending a long seasons of time in other cities, we already know that lends itself to danger, where secret relationships can begin to foster and exist. We know, we hear news of these kinds of things happening, where a businessman is he's in a different time zone than his current family, and he spends equal times away from home than he is at home. And then 20, 30 years down the road, you discover that he's been married to someone else. He's got children by another woman. Somehow, with a lot of work and a lot of effort, he's lived 2 different lives. This is what Bunyan would say. You need to protect yourself from this temptation. So if the job you do requires you to be gone, then let it be intentional, and let it be with great caution, with great care, that it would be so. So he makes that position. Now, 4 final things that I'll just say toward this end is that for marriage to remain, it must not be abandoned by either party, by the husband or the wife. If there's abandonment, then obviously the marriage has not remained. Paul, to the church in Corinth, addresses this matter, and he addresses these issues about abandonment. But if marriage is to be marriage, as strong as the arguments are prior to this by the Puritans, is that marriage needs to be a union, a cohabitating together, then the opposite of that is true as well. It ceases to be a marriage when there is abandonment in the picture. For marriage to remain, it must be attended to. And that's what we're going to spend some time this evening talking about, is what are the duties of husbands and wives in the marriage. The marriage must be attended to. You must give attention to it, you must be intentional about it, and you must give care around it. For the marriage to remain, it must, as well, it sounds like the second, it's very similar, it must be fostered. It must be attended to, and it must be fostered. I think we'll see in the 6 to 7 duties that we'll lay out for husbands and 7 duties that we have for wives in the marriage, that the fostering of that marriage for the health is very critical. That it must be intentional on both parties, that we're going to foster an atmosphere where we enjoy being together. So it's a fostering work. And then finally, in relationship to what's required for a marriage to remain, is this, that marriage to remain, both parties must speak into each other's life for the best or the betterment of each other. And we'll see this, we'll bring this out as at least a duty both in men and women in the marriage, that when we see the other spouse is in danger, we must speak into that other person's life. Because we love them, we love ourselves, we love our marriage, but above all, we love God. So there must be times, if we've come close to falling off the cliff, it's more loving to say, hey, if you one more step and you're off the cliff, than to just ignore it and pretend like it doesn't happen. For marriage to remain, we must first of all know we must speak into each other's lives, and then we must also expect and hope that our spouse will speak into our lives when we're in danger. All right. Kind of a transition out of the final things of what is required for a marriage to remain, and then move into the duties of the husband and the duties of the wife. Let me just say this. Both Gouge and Bunyan give some final thoughts and open the door toward this discussion on what the requirements or what the duties are in the caring for each other's souls. Gouge, William Gouge, in his book Domestical Duties, devotes a whole chapter to the cautions that husbands must guard their wives over. And to just keep them in a summarized list, he says, husbands, you must... You see, this gets really messy. Even before I go here, it has the tendency to open itself up for messiness. Because men, we have a tendency to want to just begin to lord over our wives, and we want to govern everything and every thought and every place, every piece of clothing they wear, every thought that comes across their mind. But we cannot do that. We're not fostering a loving relationship if we're lording it over them. But William Gouge does understand that wives need husbands who will speak into their lives concerning their friends. As a pastor now, for pastoring this church and in ministry for coming up on 30 years. Wow, somebody's getting old around here. I can tell you one of the things that destroys marriages quicker than anything is friends. Think of even friends in your own life who've gone through divorces. When there's an opportunity of reconciliation to take place, and you'll find usually there's a friend who's encouraging one or the other spouse, whoever their friend is, that you deserve better than him. You deserve better. And he's no good. You need to divorce him right now. You need to be guarding yourselves from those kinds of friends before you're in a position where those kinds of friends are influencing you. So Gouge's argument about how husbands, and he makes it in both arguments for husbands as well, that wives need to speak and need to have permission, and that men, you should want for your wives to speak into your life about the friends you keep. Because your friends will influence you. The old proverb says, it is true, bad company, what does it do to us? Does anybody know? It corrupts us. It ruins us. It destroys us. So if you got friends who are living worldly and loving every part about it, and you're wanting to rule your life in a holy and an honorable, reverent way, your corrupt friends will eventually, if you're not speaking into their lives about repenting and changing, they're definitely having influence upon you. And it's coming into the negative upon the relationship. Gouge would argue that the way we spend our time, that husbands, the way you spend your time, wives, the way you spend your time, these are places that I think would be in parallel to what Bunyan would say in some of his allegorical positions of the gates the mouth gate, the ear gate, the eye gate, where we're spending our time, what we're allowing to have influence into us. Gush says that husbands, you need to speak into your wives' lives about the way they do their task. Now here's where, obviously, we don't want to go down the road of lording, of being a lord. You're a husband. You're not a lord. You're not a master. You're a husband. You're one flesh is what Scripture calls it. And so, husbands, if there are things about your wife that can be addressed in the way they perform tasks at home, you shouldn't be afraid to speak to them about that. You should more be afraid of the way you speak to them about it. Your duty is not to be a superior to them. Your duty and your responsibility at that place is that you are ordained of God to be the head of the home, and that if you want a home to be in a certain way, this kind of topic ought to be discussed and talked about. This is why I'll make argument to every parent in the room why it's so important that you're teaching your children now what kind of spouse they're going to be married to someday. This is not to mean that every house has to be immaculately dusted all the time. But listen, if you have a personality bent that is driven toward orderliness, and your child's like that, and they are captivated by a slob, I mean, somebody who gives no care at all, there's going to be a built-in automatic irritation in that marriage. That child of yours needs to know ahead of time, be paying attention to the people that you're attracted to. Could you see yourself walking down the road with that young man, dear daughter of mine, who doesn't own a belt apparently? And the waist of his pants are nearly to his knees? Do you want that to be the man who pushes your daughter down the road? Okay, Paul, you've gone to complete meddling and messing in places you don't need to go. But maybe I do. Listen, it doesn't mean if you don't have a belt, you're not going to be a good man and a good husband. I'm just saying. Hey, you ought to teach your daughters. Daughters, do you want a tattooed man from head to toe, everything about him covered with some kind of a marking? I mean, maybe you do. But is that your duty as a parent in this kind of a situation in a time, is that you're helping your children to select and choose a man or a woman that they would be happy to call their spouse. Because this is part of the end of marriage, is that you're happy. All right. You need to know about the way your spouse spends money or feels about money. Again, parents, this you do your children a great favor by training them when they're young the responsibility of money. They get into a marriage, and it won't take long that debt will really become the crusher of the marriage. And so give attention to this. In your marriage, you must be aware that money is one of those top things. Counselors tell us all the time, and I can tell you from firsthand experience, that of the marriages that are struggling and having a hard time, financial resources is one of the things that is at the top of the discussion. And so, husbands, being able to speak to your wife about the way you spend money, and wives, being able to speak to your husbands about the way he spends money, this is helpful. It feels unhelpful, but do you want help, and do you want a marriage that is going to glorify God? And then your entertainment. In all these things, this mouth gate, the ear gate, the eye gate, the feel gate, the nose gate, all of these things, what is it that drives you to want to enjoy life? Well, these old Puritans will make arguments that you must give consideration to what you allow to entertain you. Husbands, you need to give direction for your wife about the things that she lets entertain her. Husbands, let her speak to you about the things you let entertain you. It will be a benefit to you. I really don't know if this was Bunyan or Gouge, but there's three places that whoever said this says there are three places that no Christian ought to be. No Christian has any place at the bar. No Christian has any place at the tavern. Is that not a bar? I don't know, but it's slightly different. And no Christian has a place at the theater. Now that's interesting. It's especially interesting today because who even thinks about the theater anymore? Entertainment. Well, the next time you think about a movie you're going to watch at home, whether it's, I almost said you've gone to the video store, which completely shows my age. You somehow downloaded on your magical box at home and you can watch it however it happens. That's black magic, isn't it? No, it's not. I'm only teasing. Do you give any consideration? Do you look at the ratings? Do you go and read about the reviews? If you're not, can I say to you, you ought to make that number one change in your entertainment. Is at least go and read the reviews. At least look at the ratings. Now, don't trust Hollywood to tell you what is a holy and a good, wholesome movie. I can tell you, when I was a boy, a movie rated PG. First of all, I couldn't go to a PG movie without my parents taking me to one. I remember when Chariots of Fire came out. Was it rated PG? Oh, yeah, no. Nobody can go to a PG movie. I watch a PG movie today and I think this thing ought to be rated R. This thing really probably ought to be banned from all eyes under the age of 50. That's probably too extreme, but a lot of PG movies in my day are pretty trashy movies today. I'm really surprised by them. Don't go thinking that every G-rated movie is perfectly good for your children. I was just visiting with Mark about this earlier. You know, Disney has just made a massive entertainment purchase of Fox. If there is an agency in the industry of entertainment that has an agenda, it is Disney. And they are about, I think it was yesterday, was David, as we were spending some time together over at my mom's house, that made the first statement about it, that now if this deal is finalized and finished, that Disney will own like a block of like 43% of the industry, the entertainment industry. Well, that was the trusted industry. That was the trusted company 50 years ago. I would say today, I don't know that you can trust anything about Disney. I really don't think you can. So all of a sudden, John Bunyan doesn't sound like a Puritan. He sounds like a prudish Puritan. He sounds like a caring, loving, concerned individual.